Well, good afternoon, friends. Welcome once again to Syracuse Basketball Postgame presented by Krause Health as Syracuse ends the 2021-22 regular season with a gut punch. And it was deja vu all over again as the Orange, in its first matchup with Miami 2 months ago to the day, blew an 18-point lead in the second half. Syracuse once again gets an 18-point lead against Miami and once again loses an 18-point lead to Miami and ultimately loses the game. Final score, Miami 75, Syracuse 72 at the Carrier Dome on Senior Day. Syracuse finishes the regular season with a record of 15-16. And for the first time in the 46-year tenure under Jim Boeheim, Syracuse finishes below 500 at the end of the regular season. Syracuse was up by as many as 10 with 2 minutes to go in regulation, but Miami guard Charlie Moore first missed the front end of a one-on-one free throw. Jordan Miller grabbed the offensive rebound, scored, gave the Hurricanes the go-ahead 75-72 lead with about 13 seconds to go, and then it ends up being Jimmy Boeheim on the final shot as time expired to try and tie the game at 75. He missed. Buddy Boeheim not open. Some natural three-point shooters. Joe Girard, Cole Swider couldn't find him in transition there. And there was a steal on Cole Swider at the end. There was some questionable fouls down the stretch of this game. Certainly Joe Girard looked like he got fouled at one point. But bottom line, you got an 18-point lead. You cannot let that slip again. The second time that happens to Syracuse this season. So at least one more game left for the Orange. That is on Wednesday at noon against Florida State in the ACC tournament. Should they win that game, they would play the number 1 seed Duke the next day. So just kind of a representation of how this season has gone. A lot of blown plays at the end, a lot of close games that slip out of Syracuse's hands, but it is just incredible that they lost an 18-point lead twice. Up until that point, it sounds crazy, and I'm going to start highlighting some of the comments from you guys here. It sounds crazy, but that happened twice in a season. But what also happens to sound crazy, Syracuse played pretty good defense before they lost that lead. Like, Miami was having a tough time getting good shots. They're moving the ball well. Syracuse actually was holding back the Hurricanes, played one of its better defensive games, I would say, for the first 30 minutes or so of this game. Then it became more back and forth. Miami started getting some looks, started hitting some shots. It was actually one of the more impressive defensive performances of the season up to that point, but that all washes away, of course, with Syracuse ultimately losing an 18-point lead and losing a 10-point lead with less than 2 minutes to go. And look, one way or the other, you can call it an excuse, you can call it a reason. Syracuse had 6 bodies in this game. Let's see. They end up playing 7 guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just wanted to make sure my math was right there because John Bolajak ended up being eligible, but he only plays 2 minutes. Syracuse essentially has 6 players at this point, with an injury to Benny Williams, who was not on the bench, by the way, was not on the sideline with Syracuse. I don't know if he was in the building or not, which may or may not mean anything. Jesse Edwards missed a couple of games on the bench after he got hurt. Benny Williams suffered a lower body injury earlier this week that kept him out and will keep him out for the foreseeable future here for the Orange, at least 4 weeks to recover from that. No Symir Torrance, of course. He might return for Wednesday against Florida State if he clears concussion protocol. And, of course, no Jesse Edwards. So Syracuse was down to really 6 guys as John Bull only played a couple of minutes. And, Jim Boeheim doesn't really trust him to play extended minutes at this point. And it showed because they started to fade at the end there. Miami, that pressure defense, they just kept coming and coming and coming. And they got that last swipe off of Cole Swider at the end that proved to be big play for Miami, and they win 75-72. Absolutely incredible. As Jeff says, fitting end to the horrible season. Jimmy with the last shot, ensuring a losing record for Dad. Just karma. Hope that the Suns had fun playing together because we fans hated it. Jeff, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Buddy Boeheim finished as the leading scorer in the ACC. Top 13 scorer of all time in the history of Syracuse. Led that team to a Sweet 16. Not to mention he's a great kid. So to say that you hated watching a guy who was the leading scorer in the ACC this year, I don't get that. Jimmy Boeheim, look, he had his faults defensively, certainly, struggled against Duke and some of the better teams. But, I don't think Jimmy was out there, running around like he didn't belong out there. I don't know how you could say you hated that. I know you're emotional feeling it after this game. I think that's a little strong to say that. I mean, Buddy held his own. You take the numbers that Buddy Boeheim put up in a Syracuse uniform this year and other years, and you just replace his name, and you're not saying that. So I think that's a little strong to say that you hated it. All right. That's just my opinion. If you feel that way, you feel that way. Like I said, pretty emotional after a game like this, but let's dial it back a little bit there. I think that's kind of ridiculous, right? Bill says inability to handle the ball, get the ball in bounds, or break the press. That was a big problem all year, Bill. We saw it in the North Carolina game. We saw it in the first Miami game. We saw it against Wake Forest. Certainly there were some struggles there on this team's part. Will said, hey, I knew they were going to lose. Didn't even have to watch. Just one of those situations. And look, I'm not trying to candy coat this thing. This is a team that should have won this game. They should have won the first Miami game. They should have won a lot of close games this year. This team had its faults. Okay, there's no question about that. So let's not pretend I'm going to candy coat what we saw from this team. It was a struggle. And with the injuries at the end here, now they're under 500. If they get back to 500, even on Wednesday, you're going to lose to Duke the next day. And then I don't even know if they're going to accept a bid to the NIT, even if they got invited, given the lack of bodies they got at this point. And really the key for an NIT run for Syracuse would be to get the younger players experience. It's kind of like football when you go to a bowl game and you start getting some of those younger guys experience. Why would Jimmy or Cole or Buddy or any of the experienced players on this team, they don't need to play in the NIT. So it's all but assured Syracuse is going to finish under 500 for the first time under Jim Boeheim at this point. Brian says, hard to win without a center, a point guard, and without a bench. But woulda, coulda, shoulda, Buddy deserves better for this team. Ed checking in from Georgia. If I can get that highlighted. There it is. Not being able to inbound the ball, playing too loose at the end of the game, and just a choke, according to Ed, on that last play there. Jim also noting, impressed with how Buddy worked on his game the last 4 seasons, developed into a real nice offensive player. He certainly did. Now, Buddy was not the best defensive player, but that's not why he's out there, right? You can't have a balanced package from everybody. Buddy, let me repeat this, folks, is going to lead the ACC in scoring this year. Okay? Think of all the great players in this league. Who's the leading scorer of the league? Buddy Boeheim. I mean, that's kind of a mic drop right there. If you want to take shots at some other parts of his game, you go ahead and do that. I think it's pretty petty at this point. He's certainly not the problem with this team. Jeff says, hey, Brent, how does FSU play 12 year after year? We only have 6 today. Well, they only had 6 today because 3 were missing. So there's the easy answer to that. But I get what you're saying in general. I wonder what they're going to do next year because you've got, all right, look, the transfer portal is out there. So you got to put that as a caveat. But I would assume Joe Girard's coming back. Symir Torrance is coming back. Jesse Edwards is coming back. Despite all the speculation, Benny Williams is coming back. He said it on the record twice. Now mix in all the young players this team is going to have and maybe 1 or 2 out of the portal. And you're going to have to go deep on that bench. I don't know how you shorten that down to 7, 8 guys when you're going to have 3 or 4 freshmen potentially either in the starting lineup or certainly playing, right? So I think we could see the end of that next year. And Jim Boeheim has said it recently a couple of times, including on my radio show earlier this week. Thanks for calling into the show, by the way, Jim. Called out of nowhere. Wednesday on the program, as I'm sure you guys saw the news with that. ESPN, nice to put a graphic up about that, wrote a column about it this week, 2 columns about it, really, if you look back on it. So I hope you guys got a chance to check that out. But man-to-man defense, yeah, it's coming, folks. They're playing it next year, believe it or not. So you guys continue with the comments for a little bit. Let me just go over some numbers from this one. Buddy Boeheim, 30 points. He will finish as the leading scorer in the ACC this year over Alondis Williams from Wake Forest. He goes 8 of 17 from the field, 5 of 9 from three-point range. Joe Girard, 17 points on the day for Syracuse, 5 assists, couple of turnovers, couple of steals. Jimmy Boeheim with 14 points and 9 rebounds on the day. So almost, I believe that would have been the 7th double-double of the year for Jimmy. Cole Swider coming off that incredible 36-point night against North Carolina, only finishes with 6 points. Did grab 7 rebounds in this one. Barama Sidibe, man, great senior day send-off for him at the Dome. That kid just fought his butt off just to play through all the injuries. And man, you got to give him credit for the heart and guts and sweat and tears and blood and everything else you can think of. He gave this program 4 points, 6 rebounds on the day for Barama, who actually started today at center in place of Frank Anselm. Frank, 25 minutes, a point and 5 rebounds, and got into foul trouble. 4 fouls for Frank on the day. So all told, Miami shot 29 of 56. That's 52%. Syracuse ended up shooting 20 of 60. That's 33%. The Orange, though, 11 of 25 from three-point range. Miami, 3 of 18 from three-point range. To go 3 of 18 against Syracuse and win that game the way they did showed you what happened to the Orange down the stretch, who were 21 of 23 from the free throw line. I saw a comment or two in there that free throws do not matter. I mean, Syracuse would not have been in the position they were in without those free throws, but ultimately didn't close the deal. Miami, 14 of 18. That's 77%. The Orange out-rebounded Miami today, 36-34. Just looking at some of the other key stats from this one, the Canes with 19 assists to Syracuse's 11 assists at this point. Miami had 15 points off turnovers in this game and outscored Syracuse in the paint 42-16. That's how they got back in this game, obviously with their struggles at the three-point line. And when you look at the second half scoring, Miami shot 63% to Syracuse's 28%. Miami outscored Syracuse in the second half 49-35. And obviously the comeback was fueled by a big second half by Miami after they trailed at halftime, 37-26. Syracuse at one point with an 18-point lead, as we mentioned. So, look, I just wanted to give you a perspective numbers-wise. We can go through all the numbers in the world here. I mean, you just can't lose an 18-point lead. And, man, to go down like that, to go down, maybe you at least finish the year with a senior day win. Get above 500. If you beat Florida State Wednesday, but then lose to Duke, at least your record's above 500. And you avoid that first losing season in Jim Boeheim's tenure. And let's just get on with this season, right? Let's just end it, turn the page to next year and see what happens, right? But now they slip below 500. They'll certainly finish below 500 after the ACC tournament's over, because I think no matter what happens to Florida State, win or lose, now you're 2 losses below 500 if you lose that game. But if you win and then play Duke, obviously you're still going to finish below 500. Then you got to dig your way out of it. Even if you, first of all, they've got to get an NIT bid. Even if they get an NIT bid, they've got to accept the NIT bid. So that's a gut punch right there. But it's unfortunately been a theme with this team all year. We've just seen them blow leads, mishandle inbounds passes, get the ball stolen away. Miami's pressure defense finally played off here. It's just this Syracuse team plays its butt off, but they're just snake bitten this year. There's just always just short of where they need to be. So more from you guys here, and always appreciate you coming by and the passionate comments from you guys. Let's see here. Blake jumps in to say Swider never boxed out his guy on the free throw line. His man came across the lane and made that basket off the missed free throw at the end of the game. I thought they were going to gut out this one, but couldn't bring the ball up at the end of the game. I mean, for that to happen as much as it did this year is just mind-blowing. It really is. That inbounds passes, bringing the ball up, simple, basic stuff breaks down at the most opportune time, or misopportune time, I guess is the best to put it, right? Let's see. McNamara here. Erlen, Tickner, McNamara. A lot of names there. I still bleed orange, but it's a heartbreaking senior day for our kids in their last home game. Roy wants to see Jim Boeheim retire, which he's not going to do right away. He is definitely coming back next season. Beyond that, as he told me on the radio show earlier this week, there's a plan in place. It's an ironclad plan. We just don't know who's taking over and when. So we got some of the details, but not all of them. Mark with a good question here. Axe, what will be your story of the season when you write your final article of the year? I think the story, Mark, becomes that the Boeheim boys play for Jim and are on the worst team Syracuse has had in years. I mean, the irony of that, right? And I think just coming up short was the theme of this team. And, you know, one of the more unathletic teams I've seen. I mean, like I said, these guys play their hearts out. There's not a lack of effort or chemistry or cohesion. They just can't finish for a myriad of reasons, right? So I think the story will be, you know, the irony of having both your sons on a team that ends up being one of the worst teams in years, right? I mean, that's really what's going to stand out at this point. They didn't have any signature wins. They were 0-11 now against quad one teams, missing the tournament, you know, finishing below 500 if that happens, which it's all but assured at this point. That's the story right there. All the things that just we've never seen before, and doing it with both your sons on the team, that's tough. I mean, they got a nice send-off from the Dome crowd today, but that's the story, right? That's going to be the story at this point. Just going through some more of your comments here as you guys jumping in with great stuff as always. Pete says, tough to watch this team. Just glad it's over and we can move on. I think Pete feels the same way. If they had gotten that win today, which they should have, forget 18 points. You're up 10 with less than 2 to go. Like, you cannot let that lead slip. At least you'd have something positive to carry you over. Finish above 500, just get it over with. And it's going to be the worst year in 40 years, no matter what. But at least there's a big difference to me when you look on paper and you see 17-16 versus 16-17, for example, or whatever the case may be, right? But I think Pete feels the same way a lot of people do, especially when the injuries piled up at the end of the season. It's like, man, let's just turn the page and get this thing over with. And look, Jim Boeheim says it all the time that all that matters is the tournament. It's all that matters. Get to the tournament and then see what happens from there. And this team did not make the tournament. So a disappointing year by all stretch of the imagination. Mark asking, is this the worst team in the Jim Boeheim era? It certainly is going to end up being that way by record, by a lot of things, right? Especially if they don't even make the NIT, if they don't get an invite there, that's pretty much locked in at this point. I think it's the worst team by a lot of opinion as well. But you just look at record, just look at all the marks that they set down the year. And if it's the first team that finishes under 500, which again, I think is all but assured at this point. Yeah. To answer your question, the answer is yes. Paul says, where was Benny on the bench? Paul, Benny was not on the bench. I'm not sure if he was in the building or not. He suffered that lower body injury earlier this week. I'm not sure what the story is. Maybe Jim Boeheim was asked about it at the press conference. I came on the air here with you guys. Started streaming just as Boeheim's press conference began, so he might have been asked about that. I'm not sure if he was. It might not mean anything. Jesse Edwards missed a couple games on the bench. I mean, it is kind of interesting considering it's the last home game of the year, but maybe he couldn't be on the bench with the injury. There could be a number of reasons there. So we'll see if we can track that down and figure that out. But at this point, I'm not sure why he wasn't on the bench. Doesn't mean he wasn't in the building, though. Probably could have been somewhere else there. So let's keep an eye on that one as we go here. But Benny has said on the record, and you can only take him at his word, twice in an interview with us at syracuse.com, said it on the radio that he is not going in the transfer portal. And I hope he doesn't, because we started to see this kid really develop down the stretch, that Duke game. And, he's going to be somebody that could really make a huge leap forward next season. A lot of young guys on his tail, mixed in with some experience, as we mentioned, with Joe and Symir and Jesse returning to next year's team. But if Cole Swider decides to come back, I know he didn't play well today. Generally had the big mistake at the end there, but I think that's an experienced three-point shooter and a guy who knows the system now, been around for a year. He did participate in the senior day festivities today, but he does have a year of eligibility. We know Buddy's not coming back. We know Jimmy's not coming back, even if he gets granted a year of eligibility. Barama moves on. Cole still undecided at this point. I would take him back. I think it's a player Syracuse could use if he wants to give it another go here in college basketball. Doug says you got to attack the press. They never attack it. They just hold the ball. Let's see here. David, again, look, Benny has said a number of times he's not going to transfer. So he has the right to change his mind, but he has said twice already publicly to answer specific speculation that he's not transferring. He's in for the long haul. He believes in the team and the program and the coaches. And you can only take a kid at his word, right? But he is a kid. If he changes his mind, he certainly has the right to. But he's gone out of his way twice now to say he's not transferring. So take that for what it's worth at this point. Let's see. Chris says, Brent, any guess or opinion who'll be the next head coach on the staff now or other? Chris, considering how Jim Boeheim framed it this week, that they have a plan, it's ironclad, they know what it is, I'm pretty convinced it's either going to be Adrian Autry or Jerry McNamara, and I think the choice would be Adrian Autry. Now, this is no offense to either one of those two gentlemen, but for example, look at what the women's team is doing, right? John Wildhack announced on Friday that they're going to do a widespread nationwide search for a new head coach for the women's team. When Jim Boeheim does step down, and now we've got a little bit more of a sense of how that's going to go, not when it's going to happen, but how it's going to go. Do the same thing. Keep your options open. Now, some people would say bring Mike Hopkins back if he wants to. I'd be all in on that. But this is a program that's in the ACC, world-class facility in the Carrier Dome, one of the best practice facilities in the country. I think some other programs are catching up in that department, but I'd put the Mello Center up there with almost anybody in the country. This is a great job. And you could get a lot of great coaches to be interested in this job. So my hope is that they don't pigeonhole themselves with one of two people on the staff. Jim went out of his way in my interview with him on Wednesday to say it's not his decision who takes over. He'll have insight into it. He'll be asked about it, as he should, by the way. But if I had to guess, I think it's going to be one of those two at this point. Jeff thinks Mike Hopkins is coming back. Jeff, I would take it in a heartbeat. I would take it in a heartbeat. I know that he struggled a little bit at Washington, but Hopkins just gets it. I love his style. I love his positive vibe. He can recruit his butt off. He knows how to recruit for this school to be coming home again. Now, he's got some reasons why he went to the University of Washington, but if he wants to come on back home, cue up the song. I'm coming home, tell the world I'm coming home. Paul says Rick Pitino. No, absolutely not. No, I don't want anything to do with Rick Pitino. His time has passed. He's a great coach, but there's too much baggage there with Rick Pitino. Just stop. There's too many other names. You don't want to play that game if you're Syracuse. Absolutely not. As Chris says, is that Rick Pitino's music? Guys, Pitino, look, I don't want to speak for him. He would not take the job. Rick Pitino wouldn't do that. He's friends with Boeheim. I don't look, you always got to leave the window open for crazy things to happen in sports. I don't think he would do that anyway. And get somebody better than Rick Pitino, somebody younger than Rick Pitino, and build. Look at what Duke's doing after Mike Krzyzewski finishes out here. And that could be a few weeks here. Duke could make a real strong run here. If I had to fill out my bracket tomorrow, I'd put Duke in the middle as the national champion. But John Shire, young guy, relates to younger players, smart basketball coach. What is Shire, like 38, 39 years old, if I'm not mistaken? Go that route. Why are you going to hire Rick Pitino for 2 years? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I get why you would bring it up. As Joe says, Brad Stevens, could you get him to come back to college? That's what I'm thinking, though, Joe, right? Go think about coaches like that for the Syracuse job. Don't pigeonhole yourself into two assistant coaches that have been here for a while. Think bigger than that. Call Brad Stevens. See if he's interested, right? I don't think he would be, but think like that, not just the easy transition plan that would be out there. Jeff says, makes sense. Has to be one out and out on his contract, and ask people to stop talking about Benny. He'll be a role player next year. Let's hope the recruiting class is successful. Benny's got some work to do this summer. I think we've all seen the potential. I loved how he attacked the basket, showed some offensive flair, at the end of the season there, particularly in the Duke game. We've seen some great defensive plays from him, but he's got a lot of work to do, but it's there. You can see it. And I think that's why people really called for him to play more this season. But I've seen players really springboard after knowing what to do, what to work on their game. He's got a taste of the action now. He knows what he's good at. He's just got to hammer that. It's not a serious injury, thankfully. He'll be back in a month out there working out. I think Benny just needed confidence and needed to get some minutes. I think you're going to see a huge leap for that kid next year once he gets into the flow of the game a heck of a lot more. Vince says Gerard can't be the point next year. Vince, I agree 100%. A couple other names people throwing out there. Billy Donovan, Nate Oates. Dale would love if Syracuse made a run at Nate Oates at some point. I'm a big fan of him. But to go back before that and what we were talking about with Vince, I agree. Joe Girard can't be the point guard next year. I think Joe did the best he could given the circumstances. He's got to play off the ball. So if that's Symir running the point, I know they're really going after Judah Mintz, who is not committed as of yet, but he's a combo guard that would be the sixth member of the class of 2022 if you can shore up your guard position there. One way or the other, just put Joe at the two and let him score and let him focus on being the offense. If you need him to mix in at the point here and there, great. But hopefully Symir can take a step forward on the offensive end. He did show he could attack the basket. He's not a good shooter. He's just not, you get him away from the basket, he's just not a good shooter. So hopefully he can work on that aspect of his game. But he's a point guard. Joe's a two. Let's see that next year. I could not agree with you more on that. Chris says Benny's got to work on his dribbling, but a great athlete. Lori thinking that Benny can help the new freshman coming in next year. Paul wants to know any transfers to recruit. Paul, you're always looking in the portal, right? That is one of the main responsibilities of the assistant coaches is to track the portal. It's going to move fast. Remember, Syracuse lost to Houston in the Sweet 16, and 2 days later, the portal opens wide. I saw today in passing, guys, I don't know if you saw this, by the way, that Kadari Richmond got hurt for Seton Hall. I just saw quickly on Twitter in the madness of how fast Twitter moves during a game, but apparently he hurt his wrist for Seton Hall. I'm not sure how serious it is and how long he's out, but just goes to show you, like, those players that go into the portal quickly. Kadari, Quincy Guerrier, he ended up going in a little later, but eventually made it into the portal. Woody Newton, Robert Braswell. I don't think you're going to see as many departures this year, but if you're Syracuse, you certainly got to keep a keen eye on the portal and bring in that missing piece, particularly an experienced piece, if it's out there, because it's going to be an interesting mix of experience and youth next year. As Antonio jumps in on that, a chance this team won't have a winning season next year, with the lineup being Symir, Gerard, Benny, Bolajok, and Jesse Edwards, and some touted freshmen. It's an okay team, but so much scoring power is gone. Chris Bunch is a top 100 recruit that's getting a lot of attention. Justin Taylor is a great shooter who's essentially a Buddy Boeheim clone in a lot of ways in terms of his game. Not exactly the same, but he's known as being an outside shooter, 6'6" kid that can step into that spot. So that's going to be interesting about the guards, because you got Symir, you've got Joe, and if Justin can kind of show he can play, now you got a 3-guard rotation there. But I think Symir and Joe is the backcourt, and then it's certainly encouraging that you got a 6'6" kid at the top of the zone. Not Buddy was too, but of course we found out that he wasn't the best defender. We'll see if Justin Taylor can get back into that. And as we mentioned, this team's going to play some man-to-man next year. Do not adjust your dials. That's what Jim Boeheim said. I'll believe it when I see it too. I will believe it when I see it. You can tell me Bigfoot's in the room, but I'll believe it when I see it, right? Is Bigfoot in here? I don't see it. Okay, good. Man-to-man defense. I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it too, friends. But Jim has said it a couple of times now that at the very least, the roster they have next year is more apt to play that defense. So there you go. We've talked a lot about next year, but there is one more game to go. That is Wednesday in Brooklyn at the ACC tournament. Syracuse will play Florida State. Winner of that game plays Duke. So it is all one and done from here on out for Syracuse. This could be the last game of the year coming up Wednesday. If they lose to Florida State, I could fully see Syracuse declining an invitation to play in the NIT, even if they get it. And remember, you do not have to have a record above 500 to get invited to the NIT. They waived that rule a couple years ago, but there's still a lot of teams that could qualify above Syracuse. There is such a thing as NIT bracketology. I saw a couple this week, and they don't have Syracuse in there anyway. So from here on out, we could be meeting for the last time. At the very least, we know we'll be doing a post-game show Wednesday afternoon. So come hang with us about 2 o'clock or so when that game's over at the ACC tournament in Brooklyn. In the meantime, Syracuse falls in a gut punch fashion in Miami today, 75-72, an 18-point lead gone for the second time this year against Miami. Just incredible to talk about that. Thanks for hanging, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, okay? We'll meet again Wednesday after the Orange take on Florida State here on Syracuse Basketball Postgame presented by Krause Health.